Oh boy. Welcome to the Evangelist Nick Garrett channel. Truth first, Christianity to post-Christian country. We aim to separate the objective facts of the Christian faith from the subjective and traditional for the benefit of our faith walk. Now, if you're new and you've just subscribed, welcome. We really value every subscriber here. We hope that we speak to you and that you'll speak back with us via comments, likes, sharing, things like that. Make sure your notification bell's all the way shaded in so you don't miss any of the action. Today I'm doing something I really don't like to do, and that is to do reaction videos. I know they're all the rage, and it's like we get a chance to kind of watch a train wreck here. This one's a little more kind of highbrow. It's an article that came out on the 24th of July. Let me give you the background. The name of the site that put it out. Bear with me. I want to make sure, I'll tell you what, I'll put it in the video description so I don't waste our time here. But the article has to do with the Holy Land Crusades. And its title is, Archaeologists Confirm Near Legendary Tale of Crusaders' Siege of Jerusalem. The finds confirm medieval chroniclers' reports of defensive works at Jerusalem. This article was written by Kiona N. Smith on the 24th of July. Now, when I do a critical analysis of this, I want to be sure here that we're not criticizing this individual writer, because we have to remember that the writer might turn in work, the editor might edit the work to suit their audience better, to get clicks or to get attention to it. So this individual may not have these beliefs or feelings, and they just did their job as best they could. So this is not a reflection on the author of the article, who is a great writer. But here are my issues. Let's start with the title, right? So long, for centuries now, there's been this view that Christians need to apologize for the Crusades, that the stuff the Christians said about the Crusades was all lies and propaganda. So you have that as a background. Listen to the title. Archaeologists confirm near legendary tale of Crusader siege of Jerusalem. They confirmed a legendary tale, or they confirmed a tale that had been documented in primary sources about what happened during the First Crusade in the late 1090s. Recent excavations south of Jerusalem unearthed a ditch used to defend against siege towers. Siege towers in they were these movable things that you could kind of get close to the wall of Jerusalem and hurl things at it, or shoot flaming bolts that protected your people from stuff being dumped over the top of the walls on top of them. They were highly effective tools at the time. Once you found a breach at the top of the wall, you could lay a ladder down and your men could walk across from the siege tower. So recent excavations south of Jerusalem unearthed a ditch used to defend against siege towers, along with a ruined house Crusaders may have used as cover during the battle. The finds confirm some off-question details of historical accounts of the First Crusade, including how a ditch along the city's southern wall thwarted the attacking siege engines. And this new evidence provides tangible links to the events recorded 920 years ago. Now, the end of the 5-week siege. In July 1099, European armies, fresh from the siege of Antioch, and victory in Antioch, by the way, converged on Jerusalem, then ruled by the Muslim Fatimid dynasty, and attacked the walled city from two sides. Well, here is my first question, and we don't get any information about it on the article. How did the Fatimid Muslims end up in Jerusalem? I'm going to tell you, but isn't that interesting? We're going to hear about the wicked, vile Crusaders taking back an area that had long been in Judeo-Christian hands until the rise of Islam. More on that later. On the north, the Crusaders would eventually breach the wall. They breached the wall at the gate of St. Stephen and perpetrate a slaughter that still echoes through the centuries. This is accurate because even the Christian Crusaders said in some reports that the blood was ankle high, knee high in the city, something of that line. So there was no attempt to hide that. And that being said, a caveat here, there are some writings of the Crusade era that are very ethereal and almost add elements of mythology to it to tie it to Christian aspects of the Bible and etc. But this was a report of the war by, Raymond IV, Count of Toulouse. It's not mythology, right? And they've discovered that, so it's important. A priest traveling with the army of Raymond, the Count of Toulouse, fourth Count of Toulouse, described the ditch and the Crusaders' efforts to advance. Toulouse reportedly offered his troops an extra payment of gold dinars to venture close to the guarded walls under cover of darkness and fill part of the ditch. The Frenchmen succeeded. Their siege tower got through, slamming against the stone wall of Jerusalem to bring them face to face with an enemy who had traded arrow volleys with them for the last 5 weeks. Despite the small victory, the southern assault in Jerusalem failed, even with a few siege towers in place. The southern wall was too well defended to breach, although Jerusalem's southern defenses held the invaders, ultimately overran the city. And when they did, there was nothing noble or holy in their conquest. The chroniclers talked about rivers of blood running in the streets of the city, and it may not be an exaggeration, said project co-director Shimon Gibson, a historian at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte, in a recent statement. Amid looting, burning, and worse, Crusaders slaughtered Muslims, Jews, and even local Christians whom they considered heretics. They turned Jerusalem into a ghost town. Notice first of all, the archaeology confirms the story conveyed by the Crusaders. It is not myth, it is not legend, but we hear that word continually repeated through here. 2, we hear about the big bad Crusaders, but we don't hear about how Islam ended up in Jerusalem. If you look at a even basic Google history of it, here's something I find interesting. The history of Jerusalem during the Middle Ages is generally one of decline. Beginning as a major city in the Byzantine Empire, Jerusalem prospered during the early centuries of Muslim control, 640 to 946. Well, hold on a second. It prospered under Muslim control, but they were not native to Jerusalem. 640 is only within a few decades of the forming of the religion itself. So this ignores the truth that Islam went on conquest, took the Middle East, went north into Africa, went north into the Middle East, went east into India, and they conquered and they subdued. So let me read it again in that context. Beginning as a major city in the Byzantine Empire. Well, the truth is, Jerusalem was one of 5 major Christian centers during the first several hundred years of the faith. Now, that also, we have to remember 70 AD when the temple was destroyed by the Romans, correct? There might be a lot of religious and theological significance in that, but as far as a historical event. So Jerusalem collapses then. Many Jews go into exile, but there are many Jews there, and there are many Christians there. This is a Judeo-Christian city until 640, when it is invaded by Islam. Now, to share fairly the other side of the argument, we study a lot about the epistemology of empires. At what point do you get to say the people that are living there are native? Well, from 640 to 1099 is a really long time. So the place had become, for all intent and purposes, Islamic. That's the reality of life, right? Look at every movement in human history. You have a conqueror, that conqueror settles, is there for many, 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 many years, centuries, 240 years. But anyway, so thrived under Muslim control, but under the rule of the Fatimid Caliphate, late 10th century to 11th, its population declined from about 200,000 to less than half that number by the time of the Christian conquest in 1099. Why? Why did the population decline? Do we get to learn about any of that? Do we get to learn about the harsh codes imposed on residents of Jerusalem? That at times it was closed off to any pilgrimages by anybody that wasn't a member of the Nation of Islam. I'm sorry, that's probably a more modern term. I'll just say Muslim for that time period. Now, historians mostly agree the medieval observers' account of the bloody sacking of Jerusalem and blood on the streets in the summer heat were accurate. But they're more skeptical about Toulouse and the others' descriptions of the siege itself. Well, not anymore, because now there's archaeological proof to back up what was written in the primary sources. This is a perfect example of why we should continue to trust primary source documentation as the evidentiary method tells us to, as objective fact. It goes into more about the long buried earthworks, but there are, at the end here, the remains of the frontline battle, something else stood out. It talks about the artifacts and whatnot. Now, my main issue is wanting to share this with you because it has overall this thing we see everywhere of anti-Christian bias, anti-Christian bent. Everybody else was good and the Christians were so bad. So I want to end this video by telling you how the First Crusade began. I'll be brief, but this is really important. You can read more about it in my very easy to read 200-page book called Just Tell Me the Truth About the Holy Land Crusades. It covers the 9 crusades into the Holy Land, and it begins with the rise of Islam because that's the story. Within 100 years, Islam had more than quadrupled from all the Middle East, North Africa. They invaded Europe into Spain. They were finally stopped by Charlemagne, right, at the edge of France there. And so, okay, we've got some stopping here. But in the East, there were Christians too in Constantinople, and they were under constant threat from Muslim invasion. So, Alexios I Comnenus, right, the emperor of Constantinople at the time, I guess, Constantinople. So he sends 2 emissaries to the west to meet with Pope Urban II at the Council of Piacenza. And he basically says, Pope, we need help. We're getting ready to get run over. They are right across the Bosporus from us. They are coming. So Pope Urban goes around France at the time. This is during the Avignon papacy, so he's centered in France there for the most part. Now, he goes around, garners support, makes a speech, sets up this council called the Council of Clermont, where he invited dignitaries, knights, people of all sorts. And he gave this speech that said, our brothers in the East are in need of desperate help. They are being overrun by Islam. We must do something. And it was important because if Constantinople goes, guess what's next over there? Rome, right? Eastern Europe. This continued to be a problem. And really, many historians have speculated why the Christian church at the time waited so long to take any decisive action. At the same time, you can look at the conditions in Europe at the time and say, okay, well, they were kind of dealing with some issues of their own. But anyway, that is what set up the issue of the First Crusade. Pope Urban II saw it first as an opportunity to unify the Eastern and Western churches. And he did want papal supremacy. For him, politically, in his mind, he's thinking, we get this deal done, makes us look power, shifts the balance of power to Western Latin church instead of Eastern Orthodox church. So there's that aspect of it. But what he does is he develops an entirely new perspective of Christian spirituality. Might could be used for right. And what they were doing was saying, look, all of the Christian sites from the time of Christ about 1,000 years earlier were being taken, destroyed, knocked down, mosques being built on top of them. Slavery was a horrible issue. For those who did not convert to Islam, they were charged a tax that if they couldn't pay, they became slaves. This was a very serious issue. Now, if you were to ask me about the motives of the Crusaders during later Crusades, I would offer you a picture that shows them as the aggressor, that shows them as cruel, that shows them as having done some vicious stuff in war. But this First Crusade is not that. It was the unity of the Christian church to reclaim lands and culture and heritage from a very powerful up-and-coming rival. If you get a chance to read this article, please do. It's a good day for Christianity because even through this bias, it shows yet again Christian sources from the past can be objectively trusted in most cases, unless the editors in the forewords of their books alert us to things they think are problematic. There it is. The info for the article will be in the video description. Thank you for watching. I hope you're enjoying our videos. We're making new changes with production and set and length of time and the length of research we're doing. And we're doing it for you. I really hope you'll come on this journey with us. We have some fascinating discussions and we value every subscriber on this channel. I view it as a community. It's a community of people that are searching for truth, and we're doing the best we can. And I have a passion for sharing with you the things I learned as I go on my journey. Anyway, God bless you, and may your work today bear fruit.